Welcome. We're going to be looking at, in this video, we're going to be looking at basically finishing off the process of using your additional materials, which is incorporating it into your writing. And to basically look at the process for incorporating your additional materials, and basically to, once you've got all the hard work done of basically finding the right kind of text, how to best use it and how to best support what you're constructing with your prescribed text. And that's basically the relationship you need to think of it being. As in, it needs to work alongside it and not against it. Not as something completely different to it. It needs to be basically something that's complementary to it and works alongside it. It has to have the right fit. Okay, so let's look at where it fits. And basically, where your additional material should fit into your response is that you should be aiming for about a 60-40 split between it and your prescribed text. Your 60% is obviously your prescribed text and your 40% is your additional materials. Of course, that can be varied a little bit. You don't have to get it exactly right. Now, the thing is that basically your prescribed text is your priority and it should be the bit that you cover first, but we'll go on to that a bit later. And your additional materials are the parts which support it. Now, you might think that, okay, we're unevenly balancing this between your prescribed text and the additional materials. But the reason why we do this is because you use your prescribed text to establish an argument. As in, what you're trying to set up with your response is you're trying to set up something in regards to what the prescribed text does. Your additional material basically adds to that. So everything that you've basically worked for in your prescribed text, you add to with your additional materials, which is why that ratio is as it is. So if you get that ratio right, it means that you've basically set it up correctly and that you don't have to spend any extra time with your additional materials trying to re-establish the argument because you've already set it up. So all you have to do is continue to prove it. Continue to discuss it with a fresh perspective that you're adding with your additional materials and basically to continue on with what you started. You should always lead with your prescribed text, as I mentioned. And the reason for it is because that's the text that you're focusing on. And that's the one that's also going to primarily be answering the question. So it doesn't matter how good your additional text is, and even if it's better than your prescribed text in answering the question, you always need to lead with it because that's what you're being tested on, your knowledge of that text. The only reason your additional material is there is so you can add to that. So that's where you always start. Your additional materials basically support the argument made. So as I mentioned before, your prescribed text comes first, and then after that, your additional materials come in. And we'll go through just a process of how to actually use that in practice a little bit later on. Okay, now what does it add? What should your additional text add? First of all, it should take the ideas you've used for your prescribed text and reinforce them. So it's not trying to re-establish a new argument or set up something else. It's not giving an extra perspective in the sense that it's completely changing the tone of your essay or your argument. It's taking what you've already got and reinforcing them with another point of view which is similar, which reinforces why those ideas are valuable. All of those things. So basically, it's what it's trying to add. It's trying to add an extra layer of proof, basically, and you're using that body of proof to be able to submit what it is you're trying to say. It should basically reflect the strength in your perspectives and themes, and even those that spread along different contexts. So even if you've got two texts that are completely different in terms of time, in terms of characters, in terms of situations, the fact that your perspectives and themes still stand up means that not only does it represent a true understanding of what the text is saying, but it also basically means that you're answering the question, because the question is going to be asking you about what perspectives and themes it's adding. And by adding to that, what you're doing is you're basically saying that despite the error, despite all the things that, the miscellaneous things that have to do with these two texts, the ideas remain the same, and I've chosen something which really reinforces what those ideas actually mean. So if my theme is death, to carry on the classic example, then both of these texts are going to have similar ideas, and even if the contexts are different, it's going to represent what is valuable and what people value about death. As much as it might sound weird to say that we value death, but there is some value in death, and there's certainly value in terms of how it's represented in a text. And if you can basically prove that across two different texts, you're really helping to send home your point. And at the same time, it also highlights how different representations enrich an idea and its meaning. As I mentioned before, even across two different ideas, it basically helps to sort of cement what it is it actually means. And even with the context being quite different, you can still sort of say that there are similarities and there are things which continue on. Now, the way you think about an additional text is sort of, if you look at that image there of a caravan behind a car, that's how you look at it. Is it something that doesn't change the car? It's something that you add behind it. And that's what you need to look at it being. It's not two cars sort of pulling against each other. It's something that's being dragged by the prescribed text, by the prescribed argument, and then just adds to it, adds something else to it. And whether or not you like caravans on the roads or not, it's not important. The idea is that you basically are adding something to it which is going to bring a new dimension to what that is doing. Okay, moving on. So how it fits. And now this is the big bit. You need to really work on how it's going to fit into your argument. And you should really concentrate first on establishing an argument for your prescribed text before your additional materials come in. As I said, your priority is always answering the question in terms of the prescribed text and then using the additional materials to back that up. Basically, is to have a clear line of argument first. And that's the issue if you include your additional text with your prescribed text in your opening, is it's going to start confusing things. Obviously, you include them both in the introduction, but for your opening paragraphs where you're establishing your argument and helping to represent it, you basically need to try and leave your additional materials out of it. And as I said, the reason for that is you don't want to be injecting subtle differences when you haven't established your argument yet. You don't want to be comparing two different texts when you haven't got a very clear line of where you're going with it. So it's only something you expand upon once you've established it quite clearly. This is my argument, this is what I'm trying to say. And even despite their differences, it should validate what you wrote for the first text. So it's basically a tool you use to validate it rather than, as I said, to distract from it or to sort of run alongside it. It's something that adds and validates what you've already done. So let's look at it in action. Now this is the important bit. Focusing on basically how you do represent theme. And we'll basically look at this step by step. Now the question we got above is, well, it's fairly generic. And we've pretty much written in a very generic way. Discuss how theme, idea, whatever, is represented in an example and in one other text of your choosing. And if you're doing a year 11 and 12 English question, they're pretty much all going to look exactly like that. Now, how do you basically answer this? How do you include your additional material and how do you basically set up everything that you've got? So we're going to look at it purely in terms of how you construct your use of the prescribed text and your additional text. To start with, you introduce both texts in your introduction. Very important you do that because you need to state clearly what it is that you're doing with your, or basically what choice of text you've used. Obviously, again, you leave with your prescribed text and just basically have them in introduction to say, I'm going to be raising these texts. Then you open your argument with your prescribed text. So no matter what it is I'm discussing there, I'm going to open it up with the prescribed text and discuss how it does it. Discuss how it represents this theme, whatever it is. And basically to open up an argument to start to cement it. Now, once you believe your line of argument is clear, and you've pretty much established it straight up, and you've answered the question in a relatively strong way, then you introduce your second text, your additional text, to help to really reinforce it, to really hammer it home, and build upon that answer you've already given. So you've given a strong answer, now you're making it even stronger. And basically, from there on, you can structure in whatever way best suits your argument. If you want to add another idea, or another main point, so if you've basically got theme is represented through characters and then you want to add through the setting, then you can basically structure it however you want from there on in. You can combine the two texts together, you can set up anything else, because you've already got your line of argument in there. And you've already got one strong point. So it shows that you've already led with your prescribed text, and it shows that you've basically set up how this theme is represented. All you're adding with your second idea, now it may seem like you're just overkilling it if you add a second perspective. It's just helping to, again, reinforce what you've done for the first one. So if I was to say for characters and then inject place into that, it's just another way that basically I'm structuring my argument to basically include another reason why, and I'm going to use both texts to do that. But really this is up to you. The main point is that you start with your prescribed text, and once you've got a very clear line of what the prescribed text is doing, inject your additional text in there. And then whatever you do after that, entirely up to you. But make sure it's clear, no matter what it is you're doing, and make sure that you're not doing it in a way where one is taking away from the other or it starts to get confusing. I mean, at this point, it's up to your own sort of rational ideas, your own rational knowledge, and basically how it sounds. If it sounds wrong, if it doesn't really make any sense, then obviously you need to reconsider what it is you're doing. Okay, so in summary, first of all, you need to aim for a 60-40 split. So make sure your prescribed text always goes first. You need to lead with it. You need to make sure it is the first thing you focus on and the main thing you focus on. And finally, your additional text reinforce what it is that you've set up with this. And that's basically about it. So make sure that when you do include and incorporate additional materials, that you're using it in a way that really is a supporting role rather than a lead role or one that diminishes the role of your prescribed text. But apart from that, that's about it. So until next time, I'll see you later.